Mr. President.
The senator from Utah.
Mr. President, we've had a number of senators come to the floor over the last couple of hours talking about some of the problems that we face as a country. They're real, they're serious, and they're being made more severe still, and more severe than they need to be, by virtue of the step that the Senate is, I fear, about to take. When you extend the debt limit without any plan as to how you're not going to be back in the same position in just a few more months, and you're raising it, or as we've been doing it lately, just suspending the debt limit, you're creating sort of a debt limit Mardi Gras, an era in which any amount of additional borrowing is permitted during that period. It becomes especially dangerous during times like this one, where we're spending not just to the tune of billions, not just to the tune of hundreds of billions, not just to the tune of $1 trillion more than we take in, but to the tune of many trillions more than we take in each and every year. And that's what is hurting poor and middle-class American families. It's this reverse Robinhood that's so perverse, this reverse Robinhood effect, where we're effectively borrowing against and stealing from the poor and giving it to the rich and the well-connected. We're giving the praise that accompanies it to the politicians who clamor for attention as a result of other people's spending, other people's money, that other people will have to work for, to earn back, to pay back. Some of those people aren't old enough to vote yet. Some haven't been born. Some of them will be born years from now to parents who have not met. It's not fair for us to do that. And that's why this isn't just another debt ceiling debate. It's not just another debt limit discussion. This one is so much bigger than it has been in the past. And the effects are being felt so much more directly than they have at any other time in the past when we've raised this. I know that this can come across to a lot of people as an intensely partisan place. You know, I understand how people could think that. In some ways it is. Everything about it reminds people of that, especially the visual images that they see. You know, we've got 100 desks in here. 50 of them are on that side of the aisle. 50 of them are on this side of the aisle. And there are a number of issues on which there is a division of thought, a set of pretty deep disagreements that sometimes lead to votes that break down more or less along partisan lines. Yeah, there is a lot of that. In my view, that doesn't reflect a petulant desire to disagree for the sake of being disagreeable. It tends to reflect something a little deeper, a little more heartfelt, and more than anything, it reflects a genuine difference of opinion among the people we represent. We don't like to disagree around here. In fact, I like agreeing. I don't like being disagreeable with those on the other side of the aisle. Many of my very favorite people in the United States Senate are people who don't share my party affiliation and who are at the opposite end of the ideological spectrum from me. And it makes it that much more fun to work with them because there are a number of areas where we can and where we do agree. So there are ways in which this place is portrayed in the entertainment media and in the news media that are accurate insofar as they show this sometimes heated debate that occurs across party lines. There is some of that occurs. It's an incomplete picture because there are a lot of areas where we agree, where we reach conclusions that are good, we reach them together. There's another feature of that, though, that's very seldom portrayed in the news media, in the entertainment media, or elsewhere in our society and in our culture, and it worries me. That is about the areas where there's bipartisanship that maybe is good for people in this chamber, but leaves a lot of people out in the cold. It's good for politicians, whether they have an R or a D after their name. It's bad for everyone else, especially the poor and middle class. That part concerns me. It worries me a lot. You know, we didn't get to this point where going into the pandemic, at the peak of an economic cycle, where we were spending $1 trillion a year more than we were taking in. We didn't get to that point without a lot of bipartisanship. We didn't get to the point of $1 trillion annual deficits without a whole lot of Republicans and a whole lot of Democrats agreeing together to spend $1 trillion more each year than we were taking in, with record low unemployment, with strong economic growth. We were still borrowing that much. 25%, one out of every $4 spent by the federal government was borrowed. There's a lot of bipartisanship in that. But not all bipartisanship is equal, and not all bipartisanship is good for hardworking, poor and middle-class Americans. Some of it's downright harmful. We didn't get to the point where we spent last year more than double what we brought in. We brought in $3 trillion, miraculously, during the height of the pandemic, and yet we spent $6.6 trillion last year. We didn't get to that point without a whole lot of bipartisanship, without a whole lot of Republicans agreeing with a whole lot of Democrats to spend that much more than we had. We didn't get to be almost $30 trillion in debt without a whole lot of bipartisanship. That was a whole lot of Republicans and a whole lot of Democrats agreeing to do something that might have felt good in the moment, that might have done a lot of good in the moment, but didn't take into account the forgotten man and the forgotten woman in the picture. The poor and middle-class family, it finds it harder to get by, to buy everything from housing to health care, from gas to groceries. Didn't take them into account. So no, not all bipartisanship makes sense. Not all bipartisanship has the best interests of the American people at heart. Sometimes you need someone in the room to express hesitation, to express reluctance. Sometimes it's one or two, sometimes it's half. That's why I was elated. I was pleased when a few months ago, nearly every member of the Senate Republican Conference, 46 out of the 50 of us, signed a letter. Now, the letter explained a few things that I think are pretty important to remember. Explained, for example, that we don't ever want to see the federal government default on its debt, pointing out that not raising the debt limit is a different decision than a decision to default on the debt. We bring in more than enough money every month and every year to meet the debt service obligations of every month and every year. A significant amount more, in fact. Sometimes changing the prioritization of spending can allow us to borrow less than we would otherwise. So nearly every member of the Senate Republican Conference signed this letter acknowledging we don't want a default. We do find ourselves in an untenable position in which Democrats are wanting to pass a $3.5 trillion bill that really, according to the nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, would end up costing more like $5 trillion. We don't think it's right in that circumstance to just suspend the debt ceiling, and then we're not going to do it. And so we signed this letter that said, you know, we, the undersigned Republican senators, are letting Senate Democrats know, and the American public know, that we will not vote to increase the debt ceiling, whether that comes through a standalone bill, a continuing resolution, or any other vehicle. This is a problem created by Democrat spending. Democrats will have to accept sole responsibility for facilitating it. I want to be clear. It's not saying that the underlying problem was created entirely by Democrats, but it is saying that what the Democrats were about to do and are still planning to do was the driving reason why we were unwilling to just suspend the debt ceiling. And remember, when we're suspending it, we're not just raising it by a certain amount. We're creating a period of debt ceiling Mardi Gras, a period in which any amount of additional borrowing is allowed under the law. And when you've got one party that wants to add to the tune of many trillions of dollars to our already out of control debt, one that's now in the range of about 125% of our GDP, that's a problem. It was not unreasonable for us to make that commitment. It would have been unreasonable for us not to make that commitment. Sometimes you need someone who's willing to say, maybe this isn't such a good idea. I commend those who signed the letter. I implore all who signed it to remember that commitment, to remember it to their voters. I don't think it helps for us to just suspend the debt ceiling anyway. And I don't think it helps to dismiss this as simply a cloture vote. The point of the letter was that Democrats have the ability to do this on their own through the reconciliation process. If they want to do it, they should use that process. They haven't used that process. In light of that, we have no business facilitating it. I see I've got an additional colleague here who's interested in speaking, and in deference to him, I'm going to let him proceed. But before I do so, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that we submit for the congressional record a copy of that letter dated August 10th, 2021, and signed by 46 Republican senators.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President?
Senator from Montana.
Mr. President, first of all, I want to thank the senator from Utah for his courtesy. Thank you, Senator Lee. Americans across the country, people around the world, and myself believe that in this room, they know that President Biden is failing at our southern border. That's not a secret. We've had months of record-shattering numbers of illegal immigrants crossing that southern border. We've had unfathomable amounts of illegal drugs produced by Mexican cartels, meth, fentanyl, heroin, coming into our country. It's making its way across that southern border and into states like my home state of Montana. Many of you have probably heard me say that Montana is a northern border state with a southern border crisis. Well, that's true. The crisis at our southern border, created by President Biden, is out of control. And we all know we must do something to change the status quo to protect our families and our communities. But what I'm here to talk about today is how President Biden is also failing at our northern border, the border between the United States and Canada. While our southern border remains wide open to illegal drugs, illegal immigrants, many potentially COVID positive or unvaccinated, our northern border remains closed because of President Biden. The hypocrisy here is stunning. It's infuriating. It's unexplainable. There's no reason or rationale behind President Biden's decision. It can't be because of COVID-19 nor because of vaccination rates. Canadians are over 80% vaccinated. 80%. Haitians, on the other hand, coming across the southern border, have less than a 1% vaccination rate. So if COVID-19 and the vaccination rates were the issue, then why did President Trudeau lift his restrictions and start allowing Americans to travel to Canada on August 9th? It makes no sense. President Biden is prohibiting Canadians from traveling into the United States. They can't come into Montana. Who is paying the price for President Biden's hypocrisy? Montanans are paying the price. Montana families, Montana businesses are paying the price. Montana border communities, northern border communities across the country are paying the price. President Biden and his inexplicable policies are hurting Montana's economy, they're destroying jobs, shuttering businesses, hurting our families. In fact, let me give you an example. Great Falls, Montana, proudly calls Malmstrom Air Force Base its home. They've reported that they've seen a 20 to 25% decrease in revenue due to the continued border closure. This is sadly the story we are hearing from many communities and business owners across Montana, as Canadians are no longer able to come visit our beautiful state. Mr. President, this has been going on far too long. Since the president will not do the right thing to use some good old-fashioned Montana common sense to listen to Montanans and open our northern border, I've introduced a bill to do just that. And by the way, I've seen several of my colleagues across the aisle join me in calling on this administration to reopen the northern border, and I'm grateful for that. But actions speak louder than words. Today, we have the opportunity to stop putting the power in the hands of President Biden to make the right decision here. He hasn't made it, because we know that won't happen. Today, we can pass my bill. It's called the Restoring the Northern Border Travel Act, and require the Biden administration to reopen the northern border. Let's help revitalize Montana. How about the other northern border states? Let's put an end to this irrational closure and this hypocrisy. A wide open southern border and a closed northern border. It doesn't make any sense. So I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join me in passing my bill.